Hello and welcome to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey Channel. Today we've got a couple of things to discuss, including some more injury updates, a signing of an ELC over in Columbus, and 3 trade rumors to discuss around the Pittsburgh Penguins and Jacob Chychrun. We'll get to all of that coming up right now. Hello and welcome to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey Channel. I'll kick things off today with the one signing that has happened recently, and that is that Columbus Blue Jackets have signed prospect Jordan Duhaime to a 3-year entry-level contract that will carry an average annual value of $923,000. Now, Duhaime was a recent draft pick, drafted in 2022, a third-round draft pick, picked 96th overall, so he wasn't going to get any NHL action right away, and he's probably still going to need a year or two in juniors and the AHL before he contends for an NHL role. But he's looked really good in the QMJHL so far this year. Last year, he had a really good breakout season, putting up 109 points. Most top-end junior players can usually put up 100 points, but he's absolutely killing it this year. In 24 games, he has 54 points. He's on pace for a whole bunch more than he had last year. One of the better scorers in the QMJHL for this year. So it looks like Duhaime could have a very bright future in Columbus. I think it'll still have to be a couple years before he gets an NHL opportunity. But in time, I do think he could contend for like a top 9 role with the Columbus Blue Jackets. He's a good right winger. He can obviously put up points. So in time, if he can be like a third or maybe even second line right winger, that's a pretty good deal for the Jackets. A pretty good take in the third round for them. But he's still going to have to play at least this rest of the year in juniors, most likely next year in juniors too, and then he'll probably have to play in one more AHL season. But eventually I think Duhaime can be a good offensive top 9 forward for the Blue Jackets, and signing him was the beginning of that. So good job for the Blue Jackets to get him locked up. And that's all the signings we want to talk about. Over to some injury updates, as there happened to be some more injuries over the past week, and some players did get back from injuries. So I'll start off with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, late last week, they placed young forward Cole Kopech and young defenseman Nick Perbix on injury reserve. So those are 2 really good players. Kopech's been a good third-line forward for the Bolts so far this year, and Perbix has burst onto the scene as being a really good offensive defenseman in the top 4 for Tampa. So both have done really well, but they were both able to be activated for yesterday's game against the Buffalo Sabres. Now, Perbix, like I already said, has shown like he's a really good superstar. He come from nowhere. He was a 4th-round draft pick, so complete surprise, but he's done amazingly with the Bolts. He's been a really good partner for Mikhail Sergachev the majority of this season, and he's also been putting up a lot of points, which is really good for a Tampa Bay team who lost Ryan McDonough in the offseason. So getting him back is pretty good. Kopech's been more of a bottom 6 forward. He has put up some points, but not too much. He's been more of a depth forward. But still, getting another healthy offensive body back in the lineup, huge for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And they activated those 2 after placing Rudolph Balcers on IR recently as well. Now, Balcers was claimed off of waivers by Tampa. He's been bottom 6 forward there and in Florida before he was claimed off of waivers. So he's been mostly a bottom 6 forward so far this season. But he does look like he's a good third-line forward, so losing him is not too good. They didn't have much roster space anyway, so they would have had to probably move someone else down if Balcers was still healthy. But hopefully Balcers doesn't stay on injury reserve for too long and can recover quickly, because Balcers is a good forward, even if he's just a depth piece. He's a really good bottom 6 forward, and he should be able to get into some more games with the Tampa Bay Lightning, I expect. So hopefully Balcers can get healthy and get back into game action with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Over in Minnesota, we talked the last couple weeks about Marc-Andre Fleury being injured. Well, he was activated late last week from injury reserve and has now been back with the Wild over the past few games. So getting their starting goalie back is huge for the Wild. They've obviously done some really good things over recent weeks, getting back into the playoff race. They're really, really close to a playoff spot right now, so getting their starting goaltender back is huge for them. And I think it's really important that Fleury continue to play well. I know he hasn't had the best of starts this year, but if he can continue to play like a few years ago, Marc-Andre Fleury, when he was with the Golden Knights, then the Wild are going to have a huge boost. And hopefully with Fleury back now, the Wild can continue to win games and get back in the playoff race and hopefully get back into a playoff spot, as I still expect them to. But It wasn't all happy news for the Wild, as they did place Brandon Duhaime on injury reserve. Bad news for Duhaime. Duhaime's a really good bottom six forward. He was bounced around a little bit higher in the lineup this year due to all the Minnesota Wild's forward injuries. But definitely a really good bottom six forward who I think still has middle six potential. But losing him is pretty bad. They already have Ryan Hartman on injury reserve, so losing another offensive body is not ideal for the Wild. And hopefully Duhaime can return in the near future and help the Wild team improve and continue to fight for that playoff spot, because I did expect the Wild to make the playoffs, and I still do. So hopefully Duhaime can get back, and with Fleury back now, hopefully the Wild can continue to push for a playoff spot and get back in the playoff race. Over in Anaheim, they were able to make a few activations and place someone else in IR. Bottom six forward Derek Grant was able to be activated and got back into game action on Sunday. Grant is not an offensive powerhouse and doesn't even play very many minutes, but he's a good bottom six forward, decent one, and can help, especially with the Ducks having a few injuries on the forward group. So hopefully Grant can come back in, be a good bottom six forward, maybe help out on a penalty kill. The Ducks have not done too well this season, so hopefully he can help them get a few more wins. As for the other activation, they were finally able to activate Urho Vainakainen off of injury reserve, and that's big. Vainakainen was the key piece coming back in the Hampus Lindholm trade last year at the trade deadline that sent Hampus Lindholm to the Boston Bruins. And Vainakainen is still probably at least a top six, if not a top four defenseman. So getting him back is huge. He was not able to play on Sunday. They're still giving him a couple days off. If he was on a conditioning stint, I'm not sure if he's still on that. But hopefully in the next few games, Vainakainen can come back. That Ducks defense has been decimated with injuries. They've had Shattenkirk on injury reserve for some time. They've had Boileau on injury reserve for some time. Klingberg's currently out with an injury that's left him being an unhealthy scratch for the last couple of games. Drysdale's out for basically the entire season due to injury. So the Ducks have had a lot of injury problems this year on the blue line. So getting Vainakainen back, who can come in and be a good top four defenseman, is going to be huge for the Anaheim Ducks. And I think that if Vainakainen can come in and play well in a top four role, the Ducks could be a much better team defensively. But he did have to place Max Comtois on injury reserve due to an injury. Now, Comtois had been a healthy scratch for the last few games, so obviously he's injured right now. But he hadn't been getting into many games. He's a good bottom six forward. Like I said a few weeks ago, I still think he could be traded. But putting him on injury reserve is bad. I do think that even though he was a scratch, he could still be a good bottom six forward. Maybe have gone into some third line roles. So not really great news that Comtois has been placed on injury reserve. But I don't expect it to be too long, maybe a week or two on injury reserve. And hopefully Comtois can come back after he's healthy and continue to play a very good bottom six role for the Ducks and maybe end up getting traded. But hopefully Comtois can recover and be healthy and help the Ducks bottom six group, because this Ducks team does not look good right now and they need all the help they can get. So hope Comtois can get healthy, get back in the lineup, and help this Ducks team score some more goals. Over in San Jose, they've had to place multiple players on injury reserve, as good top four defenseman Mario Ferraro and tandem goaltender James Reimer were both placed on injury reserve with injuries and are going to be out for the next little while. Reimer had been in and out of the lineup over the last 3 games for the San Jose Sharks. He was out as an unhealthy scratch, and then he was back in, and then he was back out as an unhealthy scratch, and now he's been placed on IR. So Reimer's definitely been dealing with an injury. Hopefully it's not too bad. The Sharks will probably have to run with a tandem of Kapanen and Dell for now, which I don't think is ideal. I think Reimer is definitely the Sharks' best goalie right now, but hopefully it's not too long-term of an injury, and Reimer can get back. I do think that it shouldn't be too long until Reimer gets back. But this team is definitely dealing with some injuries right now, and they're not doing too well winning games. So losing Reimer is really a big deal for them, and hopefully Reimer can get back in the near future to help this team win games and be a good tandem player with Kapanen. So losing Reimer is not good, and hopefully he can return soon. As for Ferraro, he has been one of their better defensemen over the past few years, definitely coming into a top 4 role. I don't think he's the best Sharks defenseman right now, especially with Erik Karlsson playing the way he is. But he's a good top four defenseman. He's more of a defensive defenseman in my opinion, with some drive to put up points. But definitely, I do think that the San Jose Sharks losing two key pieces off of their blue line and their goaltending tandem is bad. I don't think Ferraro should be out for too long. But once again, it's really hard to tell right now. So hopefully Ferraro and Reimer can both get back into the game action in the near future and help the Sharks team defensively, because this team is still really not winning a lot of games right now, and they could use all the help they can get as well. Over in Toronto, we talked a lot last week about how they have a lot of injuries on their blue line. Riley, Muzzin, and Brody, which is three of their top four defensemen, and they're playing really banged up right now. And they have yet another injury. After Riley got injured in last week's game, they had to reshuffle their lines, and Jordy Ben was playing a bigger role with the Toronto Maple Leafs, and he had done quite well in recent weeks after coming off of an injury himself. But then he goes back onto injury reserve with an injury he's going to miss the next few weeks. So not good news for the Maple Leafs. Ben was being a really good defenseman, playing consistent top six role, and had been producing well with the offense for the Toronto Maple Leafs, but losing him to injury reserve, not ideal. They now have Ben on injury reserve, Muzzin on injury reserve, Brody on injury reserve, Riley on injury reserve. That's like four of their top seven defensemen. So definitely not ideal for the Toronto Maple Leafs. I would not be shocked if they went and acquired some sort of a defenseman. You're going to have Riley out for a while. Ben's out for a couple weeks. I'm not really sure the status of Brody. And Muzzin may not even come back this year. So losing all four of those guys for a short-term period is bad, but losing them possibly long-term is even worse. So they either have to try and make do with what they have right now with guys like Sandin, Liljegren, Giordano, hope they can hold down the fort, or I wouldn't be surprised if they went to go get maybe some sort of a depth acquisition, maybe like a third pair of defensemen, just to help that blue line right now, because it is really banged up. The Maple Leafs have played well. They're one of the better teams in the league, so hopefully they can overcome this until one of these guys comes back and is healthy. But definitely another big blow to the Maple Leafs decor. And if there's another defenseman injured, I don't know how well that defense is going to be playing in the future. So hopefully one of these guys can get back soon. But Ben being placed in injury reserve, not ideal. And the Maple Leafs are definitely going to have to try and overcome it. And over in Calgary, Michael Stone was being activated off of injury reserve and was able to get back into game action in the Flames' most recent game. So Stone is a good, probably third pair defenseman. He can play third pair minutes, sometimes be a seventh defenseman. With Shillington out the entirety of the season so far, having Stone be their sixth defenseman has been quite good. Stone's been really good in a third pair role for the Calgary Flames this year. And I think that getting Stone back is pretty good. Before Stone was back, they had to use guys like Gilbert and DeSimone, who were more AHL defensemen, and Mackey, who's not really a full-time NHLer yet, so their defense was a little bit banged up. They also played a few games without Chris Tanev. So getting Stone back gives them an almost healthy blue line. They still have Shillington on injury reserve, but getting Stone back to be that third pair defenseman with a guy like Nikita Zadorov is huge, and hopefully the Calgary Flames can continue to be good, and hopefully the Calgary Flames can get back on the right track, as after a really good start, they've slowly fallen off a little bit. They're still in the playoff race, but they're not doing as good, so hopefully the addition of Stone helps them become a little bit more defensive and get some key stops when they need to, and hopefully they can start winning a few more games than they have been recently. But definitely getting Stone back is a huge addition for the Calgary Flames, and he'll be a welcome addition to a third pair, and should be able to help the Flames continue their playoff push. So that's all the injuries I want to talk about today, and next we'll go over to some trade rumors. Now first I want to start with the Jacob Chychrun stuff. Now Chychrun was able to come back last week, and he has played in a few games recently, and he's looked quite good. He has a goal, 2 assists, 3 points in his 4 games back, and he also has a +3 in the plus-minus category. So Chychrun's looked really good after coming back, and I think any teams who had concerns about him being slow or rusty or possibly not playing too well after his injuries, that's all out the window. I think Chychrun's still a really good top four defenseman, and any team who acquires him will be lucky to have him. So I still think they'll take a high price to take Chychrun from Arizona. They're probably still looking at like maybe 2 first-round picks and a prospect, or a young player and a prospect and a first-round pick, or something towards that effect. But it's definitely going to be a high price to pry Chychrun out of Arizona. But 2 teams who I really didn't think would be mentioned in trade rumors for Chychrun have been mentioned in recent days, and that is the Columbus Blue Jackets and the Buffalo Sabres. Now, I don't think the Blue Jackets are too much of a surprise. They had a lot of interest in the offseason in Chychrun. Remember, they had 2 first-round picks in this past offseason, the 6th and the 12th overall pick. So if they were to get Chychrun for one of those picks, like if they were to give Arizona a high draft pick and then maybe a couple of other things in the offseason, it did look like Columbus would be willing to do that. But first, it didn't look like Chychrun would be willing to. And second, the Arizona didn't feel like their asking prices had been met. So that never came through. And then earlier in the season, it did sound like Chychrun would be a little bit more willing to go to Columbus after all the offseason moves they made. But now the Jackets are one of the worst teams in the league, the worst team in the East right now. So it wouldn't really make sense right now for the Jackets to go out and use a lot of draft capital to acquire a guy like Chychrun. But maybe it would make sense. Now, if you look at the Jackets right now, they are really banged up, as we have talked about, and they have not been able to gel well together so far this year. But I do still think this team is good. And even if they don't make the playoffs this year, they have the chance of making it next year, I think, absolutely. So if the Jackets get Chychrun, it's another huge key piece on their top 4 for the blue line. They can help their defense. The defense has been one of their major problems this year. And Chychrun is still signed for 2 years after this year. So even if they don't make the playoffs, acquiring Chychrun for the next 2 seasons when they could be going for like playoff runs might be a smart move for the Jackets. Now, the Jackets definitely, I think, have the assets to pull off a Chychrun trade. If I were to be the Jackets, I would probably have to part with Matejchuk, who was the 12th overall pick in this year's draft. I don't think they're going to give up Yurchuk in any. He's their top defensive prospect. But I think in the right trade, if they were to get Chychrun, maybe they move Matejchuk. Maybe they put a younger first-round pick like Kirill Marchenko, maybe, on a trade package too, and maybe a first-round pick with like a top 5 protected for this year. I don't think the Jackets would be willing to give like an unprotected first-round pick, but top 5, maybe top 10 protected first-round pick, plus 2 young prospects like a Matejchuk and Marchenko might be able to make Arizona listen and maybe acquire Chychrun. I do think the Jackets have the assets to make a Chychrun trade happen, and given the fact they are really close, in my opinion, to being a contender for a playoff spot, if they were just to stay healthy, getting a key good defenseman to help that D-core and help this team improve right now might make a lot of sense. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Jackets are in conversations to get Jacob Chychrun, and I also wouldn't be surprised if they may be the ones to land him. But I think the more surprising one was that a couple of reports happened recently that the Buffalo Sabres might be a dark horse on trying to acquire Jacob Chychrun. Now, I know it wouldn't make really much sense for the Buffalo Sabres to acquire Chychrun. They are a bottom-dwelling team. I think they're bottom 5 in the league right now. They have not been able to get much of anything. They had a really good start to the season, winning 7 of their first 10 games, but since then they've come way back down to earth. It's sort of what Buffalo's done. They've had a really good first 10-15 games, and they've come back down to earth. So not really good for the Sabres, but if you look at their roster, you can see why they may be willing to acquire Chychrun. The Sabres have a ton of prospects, and I mean a ton. They just got 3 first-round draft picks this year. They already have a deep forward group. They're already showing in the NHL that their top 9 that they currently have right now could be their top 9 in the future. So I don't really see how all of these young prospects can make the NHL for the Sabres. So given that fact, it may make sense for the Sabres to move a couple of prospects and maybe a pick to get a guy like Chychrun. Chychrun's an established defenseman. They already have a key defensive core with guys like Dahlin, Power, and Samuelson. So that wouldn't be too surprising. if they maybe add Chychrun to round out that top four. Getting a top four of Power, Dahlin, Samuelsson, and Chychrun would make this team lethal as early as next year. So I think there could be some reasons as to why the Sabres would be willing to part with that. Now, I think the Sabres would, sort of like with the Jackets, have to have like a top 5, top 10 protected if they were to acquire Chychrun. I don't think they can really make do with giving up a top 10 selection to the Arizona Coyotes when it's a really deep draft this year. But on the flip side, I do think that moving this first round pick could be good to acquire Chychrun. Two players who I could see being moved in a Chychrun trade would be Henri Jokiharju, a former first-round pick. He was drafted in the late first round in 2017. He's a good top-four defenseman, more of a defensive guy, but can put up points on occasions. And given the fact that the Arizona Coyotes are going to be moving a guy like Chychrun, getting a right-shot defenseman like Jokiharju might be good for the Arizona Coyotes. They don't have too many superstar defensemen right now at the NHL level. They do have a few in the minors like Soderstrom and Lamoureux, but they may take a few more years to develop. So getting a good young guy like Jokiharju who can play top 4 minutes right away absolutely would be a good pickup for the Arizona Coyotes. And then they have a lot of forwards. I think that Matthew Savoy is definitely not going to be traded. I think the Sabres view him as a key part of their top 9 going forward. But a few players who I could see being moved as like top prospects being dealt would be a guy like Isaac Rosen, Yuri Kulich, or Noah Ostlund. Ostlund and Kulich were both drafted this past season and look to be possibly top 9 forwards, maybe even top 6. And Rosen looks like a top 6 winger who was drafted in, not last year, but the year prior's draft. So any one of these three, I think, packaged with Jokiharju and a first-round pick and maybe another pick or a lower-level prospect, would probably do it for the Arizona Coyotes. And I think that, given the fact they have so many offensive prospects, they have a defense that looks so close to breaking through, and they have two goaltenders of the future in Pekka Luukkonen and Levi. I think the Sabres team is stacked for the future. And if they were to move one of their top-end prospects in the forward group, a guy like Jokiharju, and a first-round pick to get Chychrun, I would be absolutely okay with that, given the fact that the Sabres look like a team who could be on the rise in the next few years. I don't think they're making the playoffs this year, but if they were to make a few moves in the offseason, maybe acquire Chychrun this year for that trade package, and maybe improve this team, I could see the Buffalo Sabres start to become a playoff team next year. I know it's a little bit out there, but I definitely think that the Buffalo Sabres could wind up with Chychrun. And while I would be a little bit surprised if they were to beat out other guys like Ottawa or St. Louis or LA for Chychrun, I don't think I would be too surprised if they were actually in conversations to try and get Chychrun. So definitely think that Buffalo and Columbus are two teams to keep an eye on for Chychrun, and I think that maybe one of them winds up getting Chychrun. I still think teams like LA and St. Louis are the front runners, but I would not be at all surprised to hear that both of them were in talks, and maybe one of them ends up getting him. So even though they're in the bottom of the standings, keep an eye out for Buffalo and Columbus to maybe go after Chychrun. And lastly, I want to talk about the Pittsburgh Penguins. The Penguins have done really well lately, getting back into a playoff spot. They started out really well, then they went on a bad losing streak, and now they're back in. I did predict them to make a wildcard spot this year, so I don't think it's too surprising. But one of the bigger surprises has been Kasperi Kapanen. Now, Kapanen is a good middle six forward, a speedy, good penalty kill type forward, but he's been healthy scratched over the past few games. The Penguins have played 22 games. Kapanen's only gotten into 13 of them. He does have a goal and 5 points in 13 games, but he's been healthy scratched for at least the last 5-6 games. So it does look like maybe the end's near for Kapanen. I know there's been a lot of talk about maybe a Kapanen-Puljujarvi swap with Edmonton and Pittsburgh. I'm not sure if the Oilers would really be wanting to do that. The reason they're considering moving Puljujarvi is to get cap relief. I'm not sure if they'd be willing to take on the more expensive Kasperi Kapanen. But I do think that Kapanen could be dealt by the Pittsburgh Penguins in the near future. I think that $3.2 million in cap space could be used by the Penguins on someone who is actually playing in the NHL. So given the fact that it's just $3.2 million that's sitting as a healthy scratch every game, and he's signed for the next year too, I do think maybe Kapanen gets moved. I don't think it'll be too much of an asking price right now. Maybe a third round pick or mid-level prospect would be okay for Pittsburgh. But definitely I think Given Kapanen's been a healthy scratch for so many games this year, and that he's been a healthy scratch for so many games consecutively, I don't see Kapanen sticking with the Pittsburgh Penguins probably longer than this year. I mean, if a trade doesn't happen by the trade deadline, then I would probably expect a trade to happen in the offseason. And a team like maybe Arizona or Ottawa or Anaheim, a team who could use a bomb six winger who can play on the penalty kill, bring some speed to the lineup, play on the third line, do some damage, I think would be really good. He's only going to have next year on his deal, and then he's going to be an unrestricted free agent, so it's not too long-term of a commitment. But for a team who could use a bomb six forward and has some cap space, I do think could be interested in Kapanen. And I don't see Kapanen staying with the Pittsburgh Penguins in the long term. So I do think a trade could happen, probably as early as the trade line this year. But if not the trade line, then the offseason, as I think Kapanen is just fallen out of favor with the Pittsburgh Penguins. And it might be time for them to part ways. So that's all I want to talk about today. Remember to like this video and subscribe. I do a blog, which I will leave a link to in the description below. And I can't wait to see you guys all for next week's video. See you guys soon.